These people cannot maintain continuity at all. Zero, nothing. Hi guys, Kidru64 here, and today we're going to be talking about Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 4, titled The Watcher, and I wish I could unwatch this, because, no joke, this is the worst episode of New Trek I think I've ever seen. Like, this is terrible. You know, the first two episodes, I was like, hey, they're moving in the right direction, there's some potential here, there are some things that I like here, maybe this season's going to be different. This is the third time I'm giving New Trek a chance. I watched the full season of Discovery, part of Season 2, I watched Picard Season 1, and guess what? They've all been terrible. They've all been awful. And I was like, you know what? This is my final chance. This is the final frontier for me when it comes to New Trek. This is my last chance I'm giving these writers to write something that looks and feels and sounds like Star Trek. They are completely incapable of it. It is insane to me how not Trek this show is. And this episode in particular, I just felt terrible after watching it. Like, I felt disgusting for giving them my time to watch this. As you can tell, I don't like it. If you couldn't tell by the fact that I'm so angry right now. You know what? Here's a little clip that tells you how I feel about this episode, and really New Trek as a whole. That's how I feel. I have no idea which clip I'm gonna play because I'm gonna plug it in when I'm editing this, but however, whatever I plugged in there, that's how I feel. This is bad. This is terrible. If you like New Trek, that's cool. You can like New Trek. I don't throw around the word like hate hardly ever, but I hate this episode of New Trek, and I can't stand what they're doing to it. But let me settle down, and we're going to go ahead and break down this episode and talk about specifically what I don't like about it. We pick up pretty much where we left off in the last episode with ICE breaking in and just arresting people in this clinic in Los Angeles, which isn't happening. For people who don't know what ICE is, it's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. And them breaking into a clinic in LA to arrest illegal immigrants is not very believable. But regardless, that's what happened at the end of last episode. So we basically pick up shortly after that with Raffi and Seven showing up, having picked up where Rios's location was from the tricorder. And we just get this smart aleck remark from Raffi, who is just probably the most obnoxious character. She's definitely the most obnoxious character in the show. She wasn't in season 1, she was obnoxious, and she's just as obnoxious in this season. And Seven's like, are you sure this is where you picked up Rios' location? And she just remarks with just a smart aleck remark, I know how to read a tricorder. It's like, okay, I mentioned this in my last video. When you have your characters or your crew, I wouldn't even call this a crew. A crew is very essential to Star Trek, by the way, but this crew where these characters consistently put each other down and yell at each other and are condescending to each other, and if the crew doesn't really like each other, then why the hell would the audience give a crap about these characters? These new characters are just completely wasted, and I don't blame the actors. It's the writing. The dialogue and the story doesn't give you a chance to even give a crap about these characters because they're consciously in an obnoxious state, other than Rios. I like Rios. He's the only new character I like. But anyway, they mention ICE by name several times in this episode, and it begins here. They mention him several times in this specific scene, and it's clearly evident that the writers don't like the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. They just don't like them. They don't like ICE, and that's fine. You don't have to like them. You can hate them. I don't really care what your feelings of them are at all, but why do you gotta put it in the show? What does this have to do with Star Trek? It doesn't have anything to do with Star Trek. It's just some stupid personal feeling you have about it, and then you want to write it into Star Trek to use it as a platform, which is exactly what Alex Kurtzman, the showrunner of Star Trek, has said in the past.
The goal is not really to promote Star Trek, but to promote these organizations and to use our platform to be able to bring greater awareness to these very, very important messages and places.
And it's on display perfectly in this episode, which just goes off the rails with hating current society.
Your politics bore me. Your demeanor is that of a pouty child.
But anyway, I won't go off too much on that tangent because I don't like to talk about politics on this channel. I don't really care what your politics are. You could be on the left or right or center or from the planet Flafluga. I don't really care. I only care when whenever it is injected into movies and TV shows and just smashed over people like with a hammer, when there's no nuance, especially in Star Trek, where nuance is a key part of the franchise and you completely don't utilize it at all because these writers are completely incapable of nuance or showing multiple sides of an argument. It's just these people are the bad guys and everything's terrible, and you get more of that in this episode, which is part of the reason why I hated it so much. Regardless, they don't have power for heat in the ship, but for some reason they have power for this cloaking device, which they just figured out that they had because this is the Confederation version of the ship, and the Confederation has the cloaking device, and that's the reason that's on the ship. They just now realized they had it. Not only did they just realize they have it, why is it they don't have power to heat the ship or do anything else, but they have enough power to activate the cloaking device? The cloaking device takes a lot of power in the Star Trek lore, and this is stupid. So they go into Chateau Picard, and Picard has this flashback back to him being a kid and his mom soothing him after a bad nightmare or whatever it is. And I really don't like this kind of trope where characters like reflect on their childhood works better when the characters in their 20s or maybe even in their 30s. But once they're like 90 years old, whatever childhood trauma they might have had or whatever things that they didn't deal with from childhood have been dealt with at this point. So it doesn't really make any sense for Picard to be having these flashbacks. And it really seems to be setting up the fact that his dad is a bad guy for some reason. His dad was established in Star Trek TNG, and he's not a bad guy. He was upset that Picard joined Starfleet and went into space instead of staying and running the chateau, and he was afraid Picard was going to die in space. Those are natural things that a father is going to want for his kid. Like, it doesn't make him a bad guy. So Girardi says, hey, I bet you were a skinny kid with an endless book collection. Picard's like, yes, that was me. No, it wasn't. That was not you, Picard. That was not what you were. Like, we've saw who you were in Starfleet Academy, who is this like kind of hothead, brash, go-getter. And it was in stark contrast to who you were when you were Captain Picard, and it's, you have to go through that journey of, yeah, you had to be a brash hothead in order to become a captain of the Enterprise, and that was a story that was told in the amazing episode Tapestry. So the idea that you, as a kid, you were a skinny kid who kind of stayed indoors and read books all the time and was afraid of everything, as you're showing here, to the character we saw at Starfleet Academy, no way. I don't buy it for 2 seconds. Not even 1 second. And there's like really this contrived exposition point to try and explain how they found out when the time shift is going to happen that's going to cause the Confederation to happen. And it's by Girardi like using 15 like on an abacus and then grabbing a book and having a bottle or something like that. And Picard's like, oh, 15, you keep showing 15, it must mean something. Oh, well, it's the 15th is in 3 days, so that's the end that's when the time thing happens and we have to stop it before then. Just contrived dumb explanation because she has memories from the Borg Queen from when she was partially assimilated by her. Kind of dumb, but whatever, if you want to go with that. She mentions Dixon Hill, which I thought was kind of nice, I guess. Dixon Hill is the character that Picard used to play. He was a Noir detective style hologram program that he used to play. So I thought that was kind of cool. And it's just really quick and fast and just moves on to the next thing. And at least it has to do with what's actually happening. So I didn't mind that little Easter egg, that little callback. It actually makes sense, and this is the way you do it. You just kind of do it, you move on, you don't really address it. It makes sense to what's going on because he was a detective and he figured out this whole 15 thing. Then we cut to Raffi and Seven, and they're on a bus, and they're trying to figure out where Rios went, and you get the boombox guy from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. I'm pretty sure it's the same actor. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't look it up. I love Star Trek Voyage Home. It might be my favorite Star Trek movie. And obviously this entire season is really ripping off everything from it. So it makes sense they want to shoehorn in the boombox guy. It doesn't make any sense that he's really there. It's just kind of a dumb Easter egg. Then it really serves no purpose to the plot at all. It's just like, hey, here's a thing from Star Trek. You know, remember when Star Trek was Star Trek? Well, here it is. So Borg Queen talks to Girardi, and there's just like I said before, Borg Queen doesn't act like the Borg Queen at all. But she says that Girardi's cruel, and I thought it was kind of funny because she's like, gets really up in arms about, how am I cruel? And in my head, I'm just like, you literally murdered somebody in cold blood in the last season, and you just completely got away with it. No matter how much the writers want to hand wave that away, you did that. The audience remembers it. you are cruel, you are a bad character and a bad person.
Good day, sir!
No amount of compliments from the Borg Queen is going to change that. So then we get Picard, and he shows up at 10 Forward, which was 10 Forward Avenue. Like, this was from the first episode where they made 10 Forward into an actual street location where Guinan had the bar. I thought that was kind of goofy, kind of dumb, but whatever. At least they're tying back to something they did this season. It's kind of nice to see that they can at least maintain continuity in their home season, because they can't maintain continuity outside of it, that's for sure. And they recast Guinan, and I have nothing against this actress. I think as a matter of fact, I think the reason she doesn't look like Guinan is she actually looks like she works out. She looks nothing like a young Whoopi Goldberg at all. I don't really buy that. Plus, Whoopi Goldberg played a younger version of herself in the 1800s, which would have been 100+ years before this. So why does she look older in this, or why does she look younger in this when she should look about the same as Whoopi Goldberg? I get it, it's a recast, whatever, but that's really not the point. The point is when I was watching this, I got super irritated with the fact that Guinan has met Picard. Guinan met Picard, okay? This is basic Star Trek knowledge. If you've watched TNG, this is a 2-part episode, Time's Arrow, in which Picard goes back in time, and that's the initial meeting between Picard and Guinan from Guinan's perspective, happened in the 1800s. So when Guinan met a younger Picard before he went back in time, they have a really strong connection. It's established that they have a very strong connection to each other in the Next Generation show. So they just completely forgot about that, I guess.
Do we become friends?
Oh, it goes far beyond friendship.
These people cannot maintain continuity at all. Zero, nothing. They cannot maintain continuity even out of the shows, okay? I'm not expecting them to maintain continuity from like novels or comics and anything like outside of that, but at least maintain continuity within your television shows and your movies. It's really not that hard. So I'm just plugging this in because this was an announcement that I found after I've already filmed this review, and so they basically addressed the whole Guinan time travel thing, and I'm just want to quote what one of the writers said. This is Terry Matalas, who is the new writer they brought on from 12 Monkeys, and this is like basically a press release essentially of what this is, or what happened with the Guinan situation. This Guinan wouldn't remember Picard because in this alternate timeline, the TNG episode Time Zero never happened, because there was no Federation. Those events did not play out the same. No previous relationship exists. However, she still was likely traveling to Earth, and as we know, she hung around a bit. So this Guinan is different, but she of course can sense something is off. She's going through a kind of time sickness thanks to Q's meddling with the timeline.
And I have rejected your explanation.
So that's basically, I'm going to call it a press release. That's essentially what this is. And this really, it kind of addresses it, but kind of doesn't. And the reason it kind of doesn't is because she was still on Earth in the 1800s, right? She kind of mentions that, kind of doesn't. But her connection to Picard like spans any time changes and any of that kind of stuff, because that was established in the TNG show. Nowhere in this episode is there any her having a memory or emotional connection or anything like that to Picard, and we're going to get to that when I get further in the episode. But this doesn't really address that. It kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. I feel like they didn't think about this when they were doing the show or when they were writing it, because they'd never even probably watched Time's Arrow, but they probably found out about it afterward and they just wanted to address it, and that's why this was come out. That's my thoughts on it anyway. That's based on the writing that I've seen so far. I don't think that they knew anything about Time's Arrow when they were writing this. So we cut back to Rios, and he's being held by ICE, and this is one of the many political things they put into the show. I don't really care what your politics are, but they clearly put the politics into this episode in particular, and it's fairly obvious. Rios is being held by ICE, and he sees a poster across from the wall from him, and it's a Pledge Allegiance to the flag, United States Pledge of Allegiance. And he's like, oh man, they make you pledge allegiance to a flag. That's hardcore. And I guess that's some kind of weird dig on America from the writers. It's so stupid and dumb, because even within the Star Trek universe doesn't make any sense, because Rios is a part of the Federation, and he was in Starfleet, which is a military exploration organization, and he pledged allegiance to the Prime Directive and other directives that Starfleet had. He took an oath of enlistment in order to join Starfleet. So he making a pledge of allegiance to a flag, which there's a Federation flag and there's a Starfleet flag. So I don't know why the hell this is like so shocking. It's so weird for Rios. It's just literally the writers who don't like America who wanted to put it in the show, and it's terrible. Then we cut back to Guinan and Picard, and they're talking again, and Guinan just talks about how terrible humanity is and everything else. And then we cut back to Seven and Rafi, and they're trying to find Rios, and the police don't have any information, whatever. They start referring to, we need to find Rios before he disappears. They mention it multiple times and use the word disappears instead of deported for some reason. There's no reason why they wouldn't use the word deported. They know what deported is. There are borders in Star Trek. There's Cardassian border and the Romulan border. There's demilitarized zones. Like, the Federation has borders with other empires and other things. So the idea that they don't want to say deported, which is something that could happen in Star Trek. If Cardassians were just walking around on Earth without any kind of papers, maybe they were ambassadors or something like that. If they're just random Cardassians walking around on Earth, they're going to get captured and they're going to be questioned, and then they probably will get deported back to Cardassia because they don't have any proof of what they are. So the idea that they don't use deported or understand deported apparently is really stupid. Seven and Rafi steal a cop car, and it would have been nice if they actually kind of plugged in the reason why Seven kind of knows how to drive a car, tying back into Voyager, because Tom Paris, you know, really liked the time period and knew a lot about cars and stuff like that. So it would have been cool. That would have been an actual cool callback that would have explained why she can kind of drive a car, because there's no reason why she would even remotely know how to drive a car outside of that. But anyway, we get this like really lame car chase with Seven and Rafi, and at least they properly use the transporters. Girardi's trying to transport them out of the car, and she basically uses the way transporters supposed to work, which is in order to get a proper lock, you need to stop. So that was kind of nice. I'll give them one iota of, hey, maybe you know something about Star Trek with this specific instance, because they stop and she's able to get a lock and beam them away. And the only reason she was able to beam them away was because she made this deal with the Borg Queen. Borg Queen consistently just validates her, and she says something, I literally wrote down this quote because it's so stupid. The Borg Queen says, "You are the brightest peacock, just afraid to shine, and that is why you were so frequently alone."
I am a peacock! You gotta let me fly!
Is that not the dumbest line you've ever heard? Rios does make a pretty interesting comment, and I wrote this down too. This is another quote I wrote down, and I thought this was funny. Rios is my favorite new character, by the way. Rios makes a dig at the whole Picard being a robot now. He literally says Picard is a flesh and blood robot. But he doesn't really know because no one's explained it to him. Yeah, that's accurate. Rios is speaking for the fans now. Like, what the hell did you do to Picard? Is he a robot? What even is this anymore? And the one instance in which I like super like blew me out of the water, the fact that they put this in here, was Guinan is just kind of again complaining about humanity. She wants to leave the planet. Humanity's terrible and everything else. And just some of the quotes, I literally wrote down a couple things that she said because I was just like, are you serious? Are you serious right now? Guinan just has the need to like throw a dig at white people here. Picard's literally saying, you know, humanity will change. You know, you need to be patient. And Guinan says, you know who has the luxury of patience? People who look like you. Referring to the fact that he's white and a guy. And that's the reason he can afford patience. Literally 15 seconds after they showed us a scene of white guys being homeless and getting donations in order to live. Yeah, I'm sure those guys fall in the same group. Like, this is so stupid.
This is idiotic.
And another quote she said, which I thought was crazy, was she literally said, "I lived in the last century, and the only difference between the last century and this century is people took off a hood and put on a suit."
What? What the f?
Like, this is crazy to me. Like, Guinan lived in the 1800s, regardless of if this is an alternate timeline in which they really, you know, want to throw that out there. Well, this is an alternate timeline. That's the reason she doesn't know Picard, because the Federation didn't exist, so Picard didn't go back in time and meet her in the 1800s. Okay, fine. Guinan was still there in the 1800s, and that version of Guinan that we saw in Time Zero did exist, who was with Mark Twain and all this other stuff. And, like, and she didn't bring up any of this stuff, so, like, you're saying that like in the 1800s, a couple decades after the Civil War, was a better time, I guess, than what it is in 2024?
I don't think so.
Like, are you insane? This is literally the writers who just cannot keep their politics out of this show. People always throw out the fact that, oh, Star Trek's always been political. Yes, it has tackled political and social things in Star Trek. Obviously, there's plenty of evidence of that. Star Trek's always been progressive. However, if you look at the way that they approach that, they're in very nuanced ways. They approach it from the point of view of humanity looking at other alien situations, which is different because humanity's evolved past those situations. It also is tackled in a more nuanced way in the fact that it doesn't actually outright say what the right answer is. It just kind of gives you a different perspective. So that way, no matter what side of the aisle you fall on, you can read that and see something new out of it. That's nuance. And these writers are completely incapable of that. Anyway, Guinan finally does agree to help Picard, not because of anything that Picard says. It's just Picard finally says what his name is. And then she's like, oh, I kind of recognize that name. I'll take you to the Watcher, based on the fact that he's dropped his name. Again, you know, if you want to go with this whole alternate universe explanation as far as why Guinan doesn't know Picard, Picard still knows that he saw Guinan in 1800s and never refers to that at all. So why don't you try and explain that away, guys? You can't, because Picard still has the memories of meeting Guinan in the 1800s. But he doesn't mention it for some reason. He doesn't question the fact at all that Guinan doesn't remember him. He should have been shocked by the fact Guinan didn't remember him, but that is not in the episode at all. Anyway, Guinan takes him to the Watcher, and then the Watcher turns out to be Laris, the Scottish Romulan lady, and yeah, that's pretty much where the episode ends. They show Q. You know, they hyped up Q as being in this season, and he's hardly been in it at all. And Q is basically trying to implant some thoughts or something like that into some woman reading a book. They don't really explain what it is. And anyway, he snaps his fingers to, I guess, implant the thought or whatever into her head, and it doesn't work. And yeah, so Q's powers, I guess, aren't working anymore. I don't really know. Basically, this episode is the worst episode of New Trek that I've seen. This was easily on par with the worst episodes of season 1 of Picard and the worst episodes of Discovery. But you know, I've never felt this bad after watching an hour of television. Like, I felt bad for giving them my time. I felt bad for how terribly written this was. And I felt bad because I had some little bit of hope for once that maybe they were going to try and address fans' criticism and write something that feels a little bit like Star Trek. And they completely fell on their face by episode 4. And I don't even know what to do anymore. So should I keep reviewing this? At this point, it's turning into a Game of Thrones final season situation in which I just continued watching that and doing reviews of it as kind of a therapy for myself and for other people who also hated the final season of Game of Thrones. Maybe I'll keep watching it just to do reviews and point out everything that's terrible about it. It's not what I like to do. I like to talk about good things. I have plenty of positive Star Trek videos that I'm working on, and I'm really hyped on those, and I really like doing those. I don't really like wasting my time watching a show that I don't like. For what? What am I actually accomplishing, right? I'm gonna watch it and then do a review where I just say, hey, this is terrible. We all know it's going to be terrible at this point. This is not going to get any better. I think I'm just done. I think I'm done with Star Trek. If you guys want another review, let me know. I just don't know if I could do it. But stay tuned to the end of this video. I've got links to some other Star Trek videos, and I'm working on some positive Star Trek videos, so please subscribe for those. And thank you, subscribers. You guys are awesome. And if you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm G264, and I always tell you the truth.